Professor Bolt, Professor Shore, ladies and gentlemen, I must confess that I have been coming to Germany. My first visit was 1950, when I visited the Max Planck Institute for Zuchtungsforschung, then located at Vogtachsen. Although all these years I have never come to Julich, and I apologize, but today I learned how much I have missed by not coming to this great institution, one of the finest in the world, and with whom everyone likes to partner. I had the overall theme for this discussion is of feeding 10 billion with less. Population will be 10 billion by 2050, of which 1.5 billion at least will be in India, 1.5 billion will be in China, and the rest will share the 7 billion. But also it says with less land, less water, the per capita availability of land will go down. Land is a shrinking resource for agriculture. I'm going to very briefly, quickly touch, because there is one, I had prepared a talk for a little longer time, so in view of the limitation, we are going to have another very distinguished speaker. Therefore, I am going to curtail my speech, and I will have to rush through. If at any stage you would like to see that slide, you can either, I think they will be making it available on the website. Well, you all know in the last 10 years, one of the problems in food security has been price volatility. They were very volatile. 2008, the price picked up in all cases. And the FAO said as a result, another 200 million were added to those who are going to bed hungry, over 1 billion. So price and hunger are related, because the majority of the poor people, they spend 70 to 80% of their income on food. And therefore, the food prices go up, they have correspondingly less. We have put here the feeding the future and the fueling the future. Feed the Future is a program of the United States. They call it Feed the Future. But in our own reports of the committee on the high-level panel of experts to the Committee on Food Security, we have dealt with what are the preconditions necessary for feeding the future. I am not going to go into the list. You can look at them. What are the enabling factors to ensure sustainable food security, starting with the conservation and enhancement of the natural resources, the ecological foundations essential for sustainable agriculture, like land, water, biodiversity, and of course climate. Similarly, fueling the future, one of the controversial areas is biofuels. Many times they have been linked with what called land grab in Africa and so on. In the NGO movement, they use the word land grab. Good land is taken away for growing biofuels for the industrialized countries and so on. This report, again, you will find it very interesting, how to fuel the future. Here again in the slide itself, I have said what are the conditions which promote a win-win situation for both energy security and food security. How do you ensure that energy security does not come in the way of food security, or emphasis on food security makes it difficult to achieve energy security? And again, this report is available now on the website, starting with policies for land and water use. What are the prerequisites for a government, for a national government, to develop a plan by which food security and energy security can become mutually reinforcing? Of course, there are also the first generation biofuel, which is second generation, third generation, which is largely technologically oriented. I find you have a very vast program in this area. So I do. The other one which is becoming important is to enhance the income of farmers, because much of the malnutrition prevailing today is not due to lack of availability of food in the market. If you come to my country, you'll find a lot of food in the market. We produce over 260 million tons of food grain, 250 million tons of fruits and vegetables, and over 130 million tons of milk produced by 75 million women, because largely the women, very highly gender-specific needs for public policy, normally neglected, but engendering public policies becomes exceedingly important for the purpose of ensuring household food security. The biomass, we produce in India about 110 million tons of rice, but the rice plant also produces over 200 million tons of biomass. How are we using it? This is why we have developed a plan of what we call the rice biopark, which really uses every part of the rice plant, apart from the grain, the straw, the husk, the bran, every one of them value addition. How do you do? We are just now putting up the rice biopark in Myanmar at Naypyidaw, at the request of the Myanmar's government. When I say we are putting up, my foundation is putting it up on behalf of the government of India. The government of India is helping because the rice is the most important part of Myanmar. And at the moment, all the biomasses, a whole series of products are made, all market-driven products. Otherwise, there is no use in producing products which are. Now, climate change is now becoming the greatest threat to sustainable food security in developing countries, particularly sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia are very vulnerable. You know, any of these changes, high temperature, now almost everyone seems to be coming to terms with a change of about 2 degrees more than normal minimum temperature. And it looks as though we can't avoid it. What are its consequences? How do you checkmate? More frequent floods, more frequent drought. And along the sea level, I saw the other day, New York Times, the city of New York is preparing itself for the rise in sea level. We're going to spend an enormous amount of money to prepare themselves to cope with potential changes in sea level and so on. Now, one of the consequences of these kinds of changes is the awareness that we must conserve genetic diversity. Because nature, in my country, Gandhi used to say, nature provides for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. But you have enormous variety of plants in nature, and much of this agro-biodiversity, as we call them, I'm happy there's a trust here which you are fostering now for the purpose of conservation of genetic resources. And cultural diversity and biodiversity are related. Culinary diversity and biodiversity are related. Those who eat. Curative diversity, that is medicinal plants and biodiversity are related. Ecosystem diversity. For example, in one of the projects we have in Odisha, and those of you know, I find many of you know India. In the part of Odisha, there are a large number of what we call ethnic groups of people, tribal people, indigenous people, whom you want to call them. The women are the custodians of knowledge of biodiversity. In most cases, they are the knowledge. For example, the last column here, the medicinal plants used by these different groups of people is very different. The one group uses 124 medicinal plants which are used, but these are all responsible for the conservation of biodiversity, whether you use it for medicine or for food. We have instituted an award called Genome Saviour Award in order to provide recognition and reward to the primary conservers. For too long, they have been neglected. Nobody cared for them, but they are the custodian. For example, in the case of rice, there are nearly 150,000 varieties of rice in the world, out of which 110,000 varieties are preserved in the gene bank of the International Rice Research Institute in Los Banos. How did they all come about? How did you get 150,000? Not by scientific breeders. They were all selected by local people for their own purposes, adaptation to climatic conditions and so on. Similarly, there are a very large number of plants which provide you the micronutrients which are needed. When you take nutrition security, today even FAO started using food and nutrition security, because food security addresses the issue of undernutrition, in other words, calorie deprivation. Then you have other kinds of problems. You have protein hunger arising from protein deficiency. You have hidden hunger caused by micronutrient deficiencies, iron, iodine, zinc, and vitamin A and so on. Now, these plants, they use a wonderful plant. This is a Moringa drumstick, it is called drumstick. It provides 25 times the iron and spinach and so on. You can look at it when the data you want. Similarly, in the past, the cultures, the whole climate smart agriculture is the characteristic of local community. They know sometimes there is drought, sometimes there is a flood, and therefore what they do, these are interesting mechanisms by which they were coping against problems of climate change, but these are today very relevant for us to build the scientific basis and build it up on that basis. For example, this group of people where there is usually problems of drought and so on, they have a mixed cropping, they don't grow a single crop. You see in this particular one there are 6 different crops. One is harvested early, the other is harvested later, they come, and if for some reason there is drought, one crop fails, the others are also there. It sort of insulates you from total failure of agriculture. Agroforestry methods of enriching soil, carbon sequestration and storage, soil carbon banks are now becoming very important part of our strategy to achieve a balance between carbon emission and carbon absorption. And the Africa slowly, and the impact of sea level rise, I mentioned earlier, how the city of New York is preparing now. They have enough money, but in many parts of the world, there is not enough money. They can't have advanced anticipatory steps to meet the sea level rise. According to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, millions of hectares of land would be affected. In my part of the country, Bangladesh, and part of India, the Sundarbans, as it's called, the Bengal adjoining, they are very prone to be submerged by water. Now again, nature provides for every contingency. The mangroves have been serving for a very long time as a genetic shield against sea level rise. They don't completely protect you. It's like a speed breaker. It limits the problems of. So we have established now the mangroves were disappearing. Many times the aquaculture people, the fish culture people were destroying the mangroves and putting the aquaculture ponds. So we have now started telling them it is very dangerous, don't lose it. It's a beautiful genetic garden of mangroves we have created by recreating all the old ones. There are local methods of adjustment against different situations. For example, Kerala in South India, they have for a very long time developed a method of one crop fish, one crop rice below sea level, like the Dutch. We don't have the kind of beautiful buns and so on, very expensive ones. They grow biological buns. Recently in Japan, this system in Kuttanad in Kerala, southern India, is one of the most beautiful parts of India, was honored by FAO as a globally important agricultural heritage site. The below sea level farming, they farm about 6 meters below, and there's one fish, one crop, and so on. So I am trying to say that many indigenous systems of coping with different kinds of situations, we must revive them. When we had a very severe tsunami in 2004, there are some varieties, local varieties kept by farmers. They could stand submergence for several days. Others could not. So you have to. This is why enlarging the food basket has become very important. Those of you who know this only is gradually the food basket has shrunk to 3 or 4 crops: wheat, rice, corn, soybean, and so on. Earlier, if you look at the books like The Lost Crops of the Incas, The Lost Crops of Africa, several hundreds of plants were important, both for food security and health security. But gradually, the market has brought it only to a few crops, and that is very dangerous. We must now again enlarge the food basket. A whole series of what we call orphan crops, underutilized crops. IFPRI has written a lot about it in their own. They are exceedingly important. Now this year, for example, many of you may know, Quinoa, the citation of the UN says, a future sown 1,000 years ago. Why was the International Year of Quinoa? It is also applicable to many other crops. The quinoa is a grain used by the people of the Andean region in South America during the past thousands of years. It possesses all the amino acids and vitamins essential for a healthy life. What more do you want? I think these are crops which ought to be preserved and utilized for the future. Let me say a word about Green Revolution. Dr. Shur mentioned about it. The word, of course, the Green Revolution term was coined by William Gard of the United States in 1968, largely because both wheat, rice, new opportunities have opened up. I would say if you define Green Revolution as improving production through productivity improvement, not through area expansion, productivity improvement, we could say that the Green Revolution started in the United States in Iowa with hybrid corn. That was the first quantum jump in terms of yield production. But the word was coined later. India, in the case of wheat and rice, 1968 witnessed a quantum jump in production. So Indira Gandhi, who was then the Prime Minister, released a special stamp. We call it a Green Revolution Symphony, because just one technology alone cannot do. Technology, public policy, services, and above all farmers. What sustains farmers' enthusiasm? Only assured and remunerative marketing. If the farmer at the end of the day gets a good price, then they are enthused to produce more. Otherwise, you may have a good technology, it won't go in the field. India also is a very interesting case. We had the 70th anniversary of the Bengal Famine, where 3 million children, women and men died out of hunger. This year, our parliament is just considering a bill, an act, which confers the right to food, is a legal right to food, not a political patronage, but a legal right to food. It has some very interesting features, a life cycle approach, starting with the first 1,000 days of a child's life, the first 3 years of a child's life, and then enlarging the food basket to cover not only wheat and rice, but a whole series of other local crops, the orphan crops, and above all, declaring the woman, the senior-most woman in the house, as the custodian of household food security and providing the entitlements card to that woman. In other words, explicit recognition to the role of woman in safeguarding. Fatigue of the Green Revolution, a lot of talk has been done by environmentalists and also others. And I gave a lecture in 1968, before the term Green Revolution was coined, that anything you do, excess. I call it a greed revolution, not a green revolution. But when green revolution becomes a greed revolution, when you exploit the soil, exploit the groundwater, use more of fertilizer, more of pesticide, obviously every action has a reaction. Some of the reactions what we want, but if you do excess, they will have a problem. You kindly go through that particular passage later on. So I coined a term called evergreen revolution. Evergreen revolution means increase in productivity in perpetuity, not suddenly the fatigue of the Green Revolution. You can also call it sustainable agricultural advance, evergreen revolution. It has two major pathways, either organic farming, wherever it is feasible. I know the University of Bonn here has a very good program on organic farming, or green agriculture. Green agriculture is also environmentally sound, uses like integrated pest management, integrated nutrient supply, where you do not rule off completely. You do not rule off completely the use of pesticides or mineral fertilizers. Use them in the appropriate way. Potato, it is by the potato I came to Germany first, so I wanted to say something. 1950, to meet one Dr. Stelzner, who had done some very interesting work. Anyway, sustaining the potato revolution, one of the consequences, I'm just giving one example, one of the consequences of climate change in India, a 2 degrees centigrade temperature, would be we will lose the privilege of producing seed potato in the plains of India. All vector-borne diseases, not only malaria, many of them will suffer when the temperature goes up. And therefore, we are now preparing ourselves to grow potato from true seed, true TPS as they call it, TPS. In other words, one example of an anticipatory research. If this will happen, how do you checkmate that one and so on. The other is the genetic anemia. Fortunately, the genetic trust here, the crop genetic trust, which has been set up in Germany, it is one of those which sponsored, along with Norway, the famous gene vault at Svalbard Global Gene Vault, which has now over 5 or 6 million accessions which are stored there for perpetuity. It's like Noah's Ark. When everything is gone, you have got something to fall back upon. But the best form of conservation is what the local communities do, what we call in situ on-farm conservation, because there you have both conservation, preservation and evolution. A cryogenic preservation is only cryogenic preservation. It is not evolution. It can't undergo changes. You can preserve it. But in situ on-farm conservation is the one which is responsible for the very large number. You have a program, I know, bioeconomy. I called some years ago biohappiness. Biohappiness comes from the conservation, sustainable, equitable use of bioresources. We have to convert all the biodiversity hotspots into happy spots. The idea of biohappiness is to convert the hotspots into happy spots. That's most important. Otherwise, always talking about hotspot. We had a very, of course, not like Fukushima, which had an enormous, because the about 9 Richter scale, very near the ocean. We had our tsunami came from Sumatra, but nevertheless, people had never seen that kind of the sea. For example, these people. So what we did was, in all these cases hereafter, we can't have some kind of big dikes and so on. Therefore, we have been slowly promoting seawater farming along the coastal areas. Seawater farming using halophytes and fish, marine fishes. And for example, one plant, Salicornia, very highly salt tolerant, and edible oil 28%, protein 31%. We need animal feed, and it's very important. So the genetic garden of halophytes, which we are setting up in Tamil Nadu along the coast, will have 1,300 species of halophytes from all over the world. There are, here in Germany, there has been a very important initiative to preserve our soils, what is called a Global Soil Forum. It's similarly, the FAO has started a Global Soil Partnership. A Global Water Partnership already exists, more and more international collaboration in land and water, apart from biodiversity conservation. Building sustainable water security systems have become exceedingly important. A country like mine, many parts of India suffer from not only clean drinking water, but water for irrigation and so on. So we have a program, sustainable augmentation, supply augmentation, demand management, and also harnessing new technologies, including desalination. There's a program called War for Water. War is not fighting for water, but winning, augmentation, and renovation. It has a large number of steps by which one can. For example, one of the highest rainfalls in the world is in the northeastern Himalayas. Some of you in your textbooks long ago might have read Cherrapunji, it was called, 15,000 millimeters of rainfall per year. If you go there in October, November, December, you won't get water, even for drinking. The water has disappeared. Therefore, we have now started a program for local people to conserve their own water, small ponds and so on. Mitigation of not only climate change adaptation, but mitigation has become very important. Carbon dioxide, reducing, the RED program is known to you, methane, biogas plants, and nitrous oxide, neem-coated urea. For example, ammonia volatilization from paddy fields has been mentioned as one of the important causes of the imbalances. But today it is possible through prilled urea, putting them in the International Fertilizer Development Center at Muscle Shoals, has developed very simple implements, very simple technologies and so on. This man, this fisherman, we call it artisanal fisherman, local fisherman, he lost his wife during tsunami. He was very much afraid to go to the sea afterwards because he lost his wife, and he has a small boat. Now the mobile telephony, I'm very happy that Julich will have a very high program on information technology. I call it a transformational technology. It can transform the lives of people, how they live, how they... Today, GPS data are fed into his... before he leaves. He knows what the wave heights are at different distances. He knows where the fish are. And above all, India and Sri Lanka have a problem. Our fishermen go into the Sri Lankan waters, they are arrested, there's a political problem and so on. But today, before they enter the other territorial water, they get a warning on the cell phone so that they don't go, they can return back and so on. So modern technology adapted to the poor people. What is important is you have to develop the information. In other words, it's not merely a technology, but also the kind of information. So we have now developed a very large academy called the National Virtual Academy. Many of them are women, village women who have just gone up to school level, not more than, they have not entered a university, but they have mastered the digital technology. And they develop the local material, whatever information they want, and use them. Is our former president, Mr. Abdul Kalam. He was very fond of this academy. It is because it's a unique academy, mainly to give some self-esteem to the local people. You know, sometimes we think these people don't know, they have not gone to university and so on, but they have a lot of knowledge. And how do you really, now how do you put it all together in the form of a research program, a rural system research we call it, and the operational model is bio-villages. Bio-villages means, and then today nutrition and agriculture have remained apart for a very long time. Dr. Joachim van Braun will mention it to you. When he was DJ FIFPRI, he organized an excellent meeting, how to bring agriculture and nutrition together. We have developed a program called FSN, Farming System for Nutrition. Those of you who are interested how to marry our mainstream nutritional criteria into agriculture with all the three dimensions. One is protein, calorie, undernutrition, protein hunger, and hidden hunger. You can do it. And there are biofortification program. The CGIAR has a large program called biofortification. For example, one of the first ones released in India is a pearl millet, widely grown and consumed. It is now very high iron rich, because iron deficiency, according to FAO, if calorie deficiency affects 1 billion, Iron deficiency, anemia affects 2 billion. And therefore, how do you really overcome the iron deficiency? Now, finally, the modern biotechnology has opened up uncommon opportunities. This is the 60th anniversary of the Watson and Crick discovery, what we call the new genetics, which led to the new genetics. And for example, in my own laboratory, my young colleagues have transferred genes from mangroves for seawater tolerance. We have the only one in India which has been approved for commercial cultivation is what is called BT cotton. You know the controversy. Germany has been one of the important areas of controversy, whether it's good or not. But nevertheless, BT cotton raised both yield and income of the farmers. We have worked both in Erie and in partnership with Erie. We are working on C4 kind of rice plant, which has a completely new opportunity here. Faster and more complete translocation of assimilates from leaf, photorespiration is rarely greater, and so on. But obviously, any technology which is as powerful as biotechnology or nuclear technology requires regulatory mechanisms which inspire public confidence, political confidence, and professional confidence, and media confidence. Media have to have confidence also. Therefore, the future of these technologies lies in the fact whether we are able to develop regulatory mechanisms which function transparent, which are highly professional, where risks and benefits are measured in an open way, not the benefits alone exaggerated and the risk put under the carpet, but how do you really do it? This is one of the, we have now, finally, next year is the International Year of Family Farming, because you are talking about 10 billion people feeding. 1/3 of the human population are family farmers. The families farmers, nearly 2 billion today, form the family farmers. 500 million family farms are there. And next year, we hope the family farming, the small scale, one of our reports, the second report, the one was a biofuel, the other is smallholders and their future role because smallholder and small holding are different. Small holding offers great opportunities for ecological agriculture. Smallholder suffers from number of problems unless you have appropriate services, technology, and public policies. The smallholder will not be able to reveal the potential of small holding. Many times I find there's a mistake being done in doing both of them are the same, smallholder and a small farm. So next year is a great occasion for us to promote. We said every farm should be a biofortified farm so that you marry nutrition and agriculture, overcome, after all, food is for the purpose of nutrition, and therefore, how do you do it? So thank you all very much. I'm sorry it took a little more time. Then thank you very much.